It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday night. My friends and I had gathered at Harper's Tavern, our favorite spot, to wind down after a long week. Laughter echoed against the rustic wood-paneled walls, the air thick with the smell of spilled beer and hot wings. Sarah sat next to me, her smile as radiant as ever, or so I thought. She leaned into the conversations, her laughter blending seamlessly with everyone else's. But there was something in her eyes. A shadow. I didn't notice it at first. Not until she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need to step out for a bit," she said, her voice steady but distant. "Everything okay?" I asked, reaching for her hand, but she pulled it away. "Yeah, just need some air." Minutes turned into an hour. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she needed a break. Maybe she got a call from work. But when the clock hit midnight, my friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. I could feel their pity cutting through the dim light of the bar. "She's probably just tired," I mumbled, more to myself than to them. The truth was, I felt the knot of unease growing in my chest. Sarah never disappeared like this, not without a word. At 12:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen. Relief flooded me for a moment, only to be replaced by confusion when I answered. "You know I love you, right?" she said, her voice soft and almost playful. "What? Sarah, where are you? I just wanted you to know," she continued, ignoring my question. "I love you." Before I could say anything else, the line went dead. The next morning, she came home as if nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek, poured herself a cup of coffee, and talked about mundane things. How the dishwasher needed fixing, how the neighbors were too noisy. I didn't know it then, but that night at the bar was the beginning of the end. An empty seat, a cryptic phone call, and a smile that no longer felt like hers. There was a time when Sarah and I were inseparable, the kind of couple that friends envied and strangers admired. We met at a rooftop party in Manhattan, the city lights casting a magical glow over everything. She wore a red dress that night, the kind that turned heads without even trying. Her laugh carried across the crowd, and when she looked at me, it felt like I was the only person in the room. I remember how she tilted her head slightly when I introduced myself, as if sizing me up. "What do you do, Mark?" she asked, her voice smooth, her gaze sharp. "I'm a graphic designer," I said, suddenly self-conscious. "Creative type," she mused, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "I like that." From that moment, it was us against the world. Our first date lasted 12 hours. We walked through Central Park, tried street food, and ended up on her apartment balcony, talking about everything from childhood dreams to the meaning of happiness. We moved in together within 6 months. Felt fast, but it also felt right. Our lives meshed seamlessly. Lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and jazz, spontaneous road trips, and quiet nights binge-watching our favorite shows. Sarah had this way of making the mundane feel extraordinary. At parties, people would tell us we were the perfect couple. We laughed, danced, and finished each other's sentences. But perfection is a fragile thing, isn't it? Beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Sarah was ambitious, her career in marketing skyrocketing. She thrived under pressure, relishing the challenges and the constant buzz of deadlines. Meanwhile, my work as a designer was slower, more introspective. She started coming home later, her phone buzzing with messages she rarely shared. "Just work stuff," she'd say with a dismissive wave. I told myself it was normal. Everyone gets busy, right? But there were moments, fleeting but haunting, when I felt like a spectator in my own life. Like I was watching Sarah drift further away while standing completely still. One night, about a year before the incident at the bar, we had an argument. It was over something trivial, whether to spend Christmas with my family or hers. But her reaction was sharper than I expected. "Why do you always make me feel guilty for having a life outside of us?" she snapped. Her words stung, not because of what she said, but because of the weight they carried. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that every relationship had its rough patches. But now, looking back, I realized that was the first sign. The first whisper of a storm that would later consume everything. Sarah and I were once the perfect couple. Or at least that's what we wanted everyone to believe. But perfection is an illusion, and ours was starting to crack. It started subtly. Little things that were easy to dismiss but hard to forget. Sarah began spending more nights at the office, her work emergencies growing more frequent. At first, I didn't question it. She had always been dedicated to her career, and I admired her ambition. But then there were the moments that didn't add up. The nights she came home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. The muted phone calls she took in the bathroom, her voice low but urgent. When I asked about them, she brushed it off with an easy smile. "It's just a client," she'd say. "You know how demanding they can be." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But once you notice the cracks, you can't unsee them. One night, I decided to surprise her at work. I showed up with her favorite coffee, hoping to remind her that even in the chaos, she had someone who cared. The office was dark, empty. The receptionist told me she had left hours ago. When she came home that night, I asked her where she had been. "Meeting with a client," she said without missing a beat. "At 10 p.m.? Pressed. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening just enough for me to notice. "Mark, do you seriously think I'm lying to you? I work hard to provide for us, and this is how you repay me? With accusations." Her words cut deep, but the tears in her eyes made me doubt myself. Was I being paranoid? Was I creating problems where there were none? The doubts began to eat away at me. I started checking her social media, scrolling through her posts for anything unusual. But Sarah was careful. Her online presence was flawless, every photo and comment perfectly curated. Then, there were the nights she came home late and didn't come to bed. I'd find her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, a glass of wine in her hand. "Long day?" I'd ask. "Yeah," she'd whisper, avoiding my gaze. One morning, while tidying up, I found a receipt tucked into her purse. Dinner for two at an upscale restaurant, a place we had never been together. The date on the receipt matched a night she claimed to be working late. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I kept it, my mind racing with questions. Was this just a misunderstanding? Or was it proof of something darker? The turning point came a week later. Sarah left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she stepped out to take a call. A message popped up on the screen. It was from someone named Jason. The preview read, "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again." My chest tightened. When Sarah returned, I acted normal. But inside, everything felt like it was unraveling. The cracks in the facade were no longer subtle. They were glaring, impossible to ignore. And for the first time, I realized I might not know the woman I had built my life around. A week after I saw Jason's message, the first letter arrived. It was a plain white envelope, unmarked except for my name written in neat, blocky handwriting. No return address. At first, I thought it was junk mail or some weird marketing ploy. But when I opened it, my heart sank. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 words scrawled in black ink. "She's lying to you." I stared at it, frozen. The words felt like a punch to the gut, as if someone had reached inside my chest and yanked out everything I had been trying to ignore. Who sent this? And how did they know? I scanned the street outside, my eyes darting between the parked cars and passing pedestrians. Was someone watching me? I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Like the walls had eyes and someone was pulling the strings of a puppet show I didn't know I was part of. When Sarah came home that evening, I didn't mention the letter. I wasn't ready to confront her or whoever was behind this. Instead, I tucked the note into my desk drawer and tried to act normal. But my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every word she said felt like a potential lie. Every glance at her phone, every late night at work became another piece of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. A few days later, another envelope appeared. This one was more detailed, the words typed this time. "Jason isn't the only one. She's been lying for years." Years. The weight of that word hit me like a freight train. If this was true, it meant everything I thought I knew about Sarah, about us, was built on lies. I started analyzing every interaction we'd ever had, replaying memories in my head like a detective reviewing a case file. The way she'd always been so particular about her phone, keeping it face down on the table. The work trips that always seemed to pop up at the last minute. The nights she came home with a distant look in her eyes. One night, after Sarah went to bed, I sat in the living room with the letters spread out on the coffee table. The words stared back at me, daring me to do something. Anything. I decided to call the number I had once seen pop up on her phone, a number she claimed was her coworker's. The voicemail confirmed it. Jason. His voice was smooth, confident, the kind of voice that made you feel small even through a recording. Hanging up, I felt a mix of anger and fear. Who was Jason? What was Sarah hiding? And who the hell was sending these letters? By now, the cracks weren't just in my marriage. They were in my sense of reality. The next morning, another envelope arrived. This time, it was accompanied by a photograph. Sarah and Jason, sitting together at a restaurant I didn't recognize. Her hand was on his, their smiles wide and carefree. The caption beneath it read, "Do you see it now?" And I did. After the photograph, I couldn't unsee what was happening around me. It felt like I was living in someone else's life, a twisted version where every shadow held a secret and every smile hid a lie. I started watching Sarah more closely. Not openly, no, that would have given her a reason to shut me out completely. Instead, I became a quiet observer, blending into the background of our shared life. It was late one evening when she announced she had another work meeting. Her tone was casual, the same practiced nonchalance she always used. "I might be late," she said, slipping into her coat. "Take your time," I replied, forcing a smile. The moment the door closed behind her, I sprang into action. I grabbed my jacket, slipped on a pair of sneakers, and followed her at a safe distance. Her car pulled out of the driveway, and I stayed far enough back that the taillights were just a faint glow in the distance. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a drum roll of uncertainty. She didn't go to the office. Instead, she drove across town to a dimly lit street lined with trendy restaurants and boutique shops. I parked a block away and watched as she stepped into an upscale restaurant, her confident stride unwavering. I waited 5 minutes before following her inside. The place was packed, the low hum of conversations mingling with the clinking of glasses. I scanned the room, my stomach sinking when I saw her. She wasn't alone. Jason sat across from her, his body language unmistakably intimate. He leaned forward, his hand brushing hers as they spoke. Sarah laughed. An easy, genuine laugh I hadn't heard in months. I took a seat at the bar, far enough away to avoid detection but close enough to watch. The bartender asked if I wanted a drink, but I waved him off, too focused on the scene unfolding before me. Their conversation seemed light, casual, but their body language told a different story. The way Sarah tilted her head, the way Jason reached across the table to touch her wrist. It was as if they were the only two people in the world. An hour passed, then two. I watched as they paid the bill and left together, their hands brushing briefly before Sarah pulled hers away. I followed them outside, keeping to the shadows. They walked down the street, stopping in front of Jason's car. For a moment, they stood close, their faces inches apart. My breath caught in my throat as I waited to see what would happen. But instead of a kiss, Sarah stepped back, her expression unreadable. She said something I couldn't hear, then turned and walked away. Jason watched her go, a conflicted look on his face. I stayed in my car long after Sarah drove home, my mind racing. Who was Jason to her? A lover? A friend? Something in between? And why had she walked away from him instead of staying? That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together the puzzle. The shadows I had been watching weren't just hers. They were mine, too. Shadows of doubt, of fear, of a life unraveling one secret at a time. And somewhere in those shadows, I knew the truth was waiting to be uncovered. The following days felt like I was walking through a haze, trapped in a world that no longer made sense. I couldn't focus on anything: work, friends, even the simple conversations with Sarah. My mind kept drifting back to the restaurant, to the way she had looked at Jason, the way they moved around each other like magnets. But something wasn't right. There was still a part of Sarah that felt distant, as if she was waiting for me to catch up to something. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers I was searching for were just beyond my reach. So I decided to follow her again. It was late, and Sarah was getting ready for another work meeting. She had dressed up in one of her sleek business outfits, something she knew would make her look professional, yet undeniably attractive. When she grabbed her purse and headed for the door, I couldn't help but feel a sinking sensation in my gut. This time, I wasn't just following her out of suspicion. I was following her because I knew there was something I wasn't being told. Something she was hiding in plain sight. I slipped into my car, keeping a safe distance as she drove off. Her route took her into the city, through winding streets and dark alleys I didn't recognize. I'd never been this paranoid, but I was desperate now. Desperate to know the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. I followed her for nearly an hour, all the while trying to calm my mind. I wasn't just chasing her. I was chasing the ghost of the woman I thought I knew. Finally, she parked outside a nondescript building. It was old, with faded brick walls and a single dim light flickering above the entrance. A part of me wanted to turn back, to forget about everything and walk away, but another part, the darker part, urged me to go further. I parked a few blocks away, then made my way on foot. The night was quiet, too quiet, as if the world had gone still in anticipation. I kept to the shadows, moving quickly, carefully, until I reached the alley behind the building. Sarah had disappeared inside, and I couldn't see her anymore, but I could hear voices, low murmurs, laughter. Then a door opened, and the sound of footsteps echoed in the night. I ducked behind a dumpster, holding my breath. Through a crack in the alley, I saw her, Sarah, standing with someone I hadn't expected, Jason. But there was another figure, too taller, broader, with a face I didn't recognize. They were standing too close, their voices low, and something about the way Sarah looked at him sent a cold shiver down my spine. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even speaking with the easy confidence I had seen with Jason. This was different. The figure handed Sarah something, a small envelope. She took it, her fingers trembling as she tucked it into her bag. I couldn't make out the details, but I didn't need to. The way she acted, the way she moved, this wasn't just business. This was something else. My pulse quickened as I debated my next move. Should I confront her? Should I shout her name and end this game right now? But I stayed hidden. I stayed silent. Because deep down, I knew the truth would only be more complicated than I could ever imagine. Sarah left the alley first, walking away quickly, her heels clicking against the pavement. I waited for a moment, then followed her from a distance. She didn't notice me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was slipping deeper into a world I didn't understand. When I finally returned home, my mind was a mess. What was she hiding? Who was the man she had met? And why was she so careful, so guarded about it all? I tried to sleep that night, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed the scene over and over again, each moment heavier than the last. There was something dark, something secret, buried deep within our life together, and I had finally started to uncover it. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized that uncovering the truth might destroy everything I had ever known. The days blurred together after that night, as if time itself was stretching and warping, refusing to give me any clear answers. Each moment with Sarah felt like a performance. Her smile, her gestures, her conversations, they all seemed rehearsed, as though she was playing a part in a script I didn't have access to. But the longer I stayed silent, the more I felt the walls closing in. I couldn't keep living like this, on the edge of a truth I was terrified to face. So I made a decision. I would confront her. The house felt too quiet when Sarah came home that evening. She entered, tossed her keys on the table, and went straight to the kitchen without saying a word. I stood in the doorway, watching her movements, wondering if she knew what was coming. "Sarah," I said, my voice low but steady. She froze. Her back was to me, but I saw the subtle shift in her posture, the slight tension in her shoulders. "Yeah?" she replied, keeping her tone casual. "Who were you with last night?" Her back stiffened, and I could almost feel the walls going up. She didn't turn to face me immediately, but when she did, her eyes were hard, defensive. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Sarah. My voice cracked slightly. I hated the way I sounded, like I was pleading, but I had to push. I saw you with Jason and some guy last night. What's going on? What aren't you telling me? She sighed, running a hand through her hair, and for a moment, I thought she might break. But then, she did the last thing I expected. She laughed. A soft, almost mocking laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Is that what you think? That I'm cheating on you? Her tone was cold, biting. You think I'm some kind of liar? I opened my mouth to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. This wasn't how I expected her to react. Where was the guilt, the hesitation? Instead, it was like I had pressed a button that triggered an entirely different version of her. Yes, Mark, she said, stepping closer to me now, her eyes narrowing. I'm lying, but not about what you think. I'm lying because you can't see past your own damn insecurities. You've been suspicious of me for months now, haven't you? Following me, checking my phone, looking for things that aren't there. Her words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. Then what was last night? What was it with that guy? She let out a heavy sigh, rubbing her temples as if she was trying to calm herself down. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, quieter. That was a business meeting. Yes, Jason's involved in some of my projects. But the other guy, he's an investor. And yes, I had to meet him at that hour because of a deal we're working on. I didn't know if I should believe her. Everything in me screamed that something wasn't right. But her calm demeanor was almost convincing. Almost. I don't know why I'm explaining myself to you, she continued, her voice now tinged with frustration. You've made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Don't, I said, my voice rising slightly. Don't turn this on me. You're the one who's been lying, Sarah. Not me. The silence that followed was suffocating. She crossed her arms, her eyes avoiding mine as the tension hung in the air. Finally, she spoke again, this time softer, almost resigned. You're right, she said quietly. There's been a lot I haven't told you, but it's not what you think. My heart raced as I waited for her to explain. But before she could continue, the sound of my phone ringing shattered the moment. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number, but something inside me told me I had to answer. I raised the phone to my ear, and a voice I didn't recognize spoke. Mark, the voice said, low and calm. You don't know who I am, but I know you. I know everything about your wife, and I think it's time you knew the truth. My breath caught in my chest. This wasn't a telemarketer. This wasn't a random call. This was someone who knew everything. Someone who was about to reveal the darkest secret Sarah had been hiding. Meet me tonight, the voice continued. I'll tell you everything. But if you don't show up, you'll never get the answers you're looking for. And then the line went dead. I looked at Sarah, whose eyes were wide now, her face pale. I don't know who that was, I whispered. But they know something, and I'm going to find out what it is. Sarah's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Mark, she warned, her voice trembling with an emotion I couldn't quite place. But I had to know. The night felt colder than usual, as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I couldn't stop thinking about the phone call, the voice that seemed so calm and yet full of a hidden menace. Whoever this was, whatever this was, had to know something that could shatter everything. I drove to the location they gave me, an abandoned parking lot at the edge of town. The streets around it were deserted, the only light coming from the dim glow of a street lamp at the far end. My heart pounded in my chest as I parked my car under the shadow of a rusted sign, the engine's idle hum echoing in the stillness. I stepped out of the car and looked around, half expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. But the lot was empty, and for a moment I questioned if I had been played, if this was all some elaborate trap. I checked my phone. No new messages. No sign of anyone approaching. Then, I saw movement from the far corner of the lot. A man was walking toward me. Tall, dressed in black, his face obscured by the shadows. His pace was deliberate, as though he knew exactly when to arrive, exactly where I would be standing. I held my ground, my fists clenched, ready for whatever came next. When he was close enough, he stopped, his hands slipping into the pockets of his jacket. His face was still hidden in the dark, but his voice was unmistakable. "You're looking for answers, Mark." The voice sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the same voice from the phone. It was deeper, raspier, as though the man had been smoking for years. "I'm here," I said, trying to steady my breath, "because someone's been lying to me about my wife." "Who are you?" The man smirked, his face finally coming into the light just enough for me to make out the sharp lines of his features. He wasn't someone I recognized, but there was something about his eyes that felt familiar. Cold, calculating, like he had been watching me for much longer than I cared to admit. "You're not here to ask about me," he said, his voice low and smooth. "You're here because you want the truth about your wife, Sarah." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Tell me." The man nodded, his lips curling into a grim smile. "Sarah's been lying to you for a long time, Mark. But what you don't know is that she's not just hiding things about herself. She's been hiding the fact that she's involved in something much bigger than you realize." My chest tightened, the words hanging in the air like an unspoken threat. "What are you talking about?" "Her work," he said simply. "It's not just business deals and investors. There's something else she's been involved in. Something illegal." I felt a wave of dizziness sweep over me. Illegal? What could she possibly be mixed up in? Sarah, the woman I had built my life with, the woman I trusted with everything. Could she really be involved in something like that? "I know this is hard to believe," the man continued, his voice calm but unsettling. "But it's true. Sarah's been working with some dangerous people. People who don't take kindly to being crossed. And if you keep digging, if you keep looking for answers, you're going to put yourself in their crosshairs." A knot formed in my stomach. "Who are they? What do they want with her?" The man paused, his gaze shifting as though weighing his next words carefully. "They want something she has. Something she's been hiding from you for years." I took a step forward, desperate for answers. "What is it? What is she hiding?" The man's eyes flashed briefly, almost as though he had been caught off guard by my intensity. But then he shrugged nonchalantly. "You'll find out soon enough," he said. "But let me tell you this. Don't expect Sarah to explain herself. She's deep in this, and the deeper you dig, the more dangerous it becomes. For both of you." I didn't know how to process what he was telling me. My mind was racing with questions, with images of Sarah I had never thought possible. Was she really mixed up in something criminal? Had I been so blind to the signs that I never saw it coming? Before I could speak, the man took a step back, his figure already melting into the shadows. "I've told you what you needed to hear, Mark," he said, his voice fading. "You can make your choice now, but don't say I didn't warn you." And just like that, he was gone, swallowed by the night. I stood there for a long time, frozen, my thoughts spiraling out of control. Everything I thought I knew about Sarah, about us, was being torn apart piece by piece. But one thing was clear. I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after hearing that. As I drove home, the weight of the truth, the terrifying, impossible truth, pressed down on me. I had to find out what Sarah was involved in, no matter the cost. But deep inside, I couldn't help but wonder if the answers would destroy everything I held dear. Couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every question I had, every fear that had crept up over the last few weeks, was now screaming at me all at once. Was Sarah really mixed up in something dangerous? And if she was, how far had she gone? The man's words echoed in my mind. "She's hiding something she's been keeping from you for years. What could be so significant? What could she have been involved in without me knowing?" The next morning, I tried to act normal. I walked around the house, pretending everything was fine, but it felt like I was walking through a fog. My every movement, my every glance at Sarah, was weighed down by the knowledge that something was wrong. Sarah was already up, preparing breakfast, her usual routine. She didn't look at me as I entered the kitchen, her focus entirely on the sizzling pan in front of her. It should have been a comforting scene. Our life, the life we had built together, but it felt foreign. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice a little too light, too casual. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." She didn't seem to notice the edge in my tone. She smiled, handing me a plate of eggs. "You're working late tonight, right? Big presentation." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I set the plate down and turned to face her. The words felt like they were stuck in my throat, but I had to ask. "Sarah, what's going on?" She looked up at me, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" "I know you've been lying to me," I said quietly, unable to hold it in any longer. "About your meetings, about Jason, about everything. I need to know what's really going on. I need to know what you're involved in." Her expression hardened, the mask slipping away for just a second. "Mark," she said slowly, almost warningly, "you don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me," I said, stepping closer, my voice breaking through the calm facade. "I need to know, Sarah. I can't keep living like this, wondering what you're hiding. Please, just tell me the truth." She stood up from the table, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed her hair back behind her ear. "It's not that simple. You wouldn't understand." I reached for her arm, gently pulling her back towards me. "Try me." For a moment there was silence. Her eyes searched mine, and for the first time in months, I saw the fear in her eyes. She looked vulnerable, a side of her I had never seen before. "I didn't want you to know about this," she said quietly. "But now you're asking, and I don't know how much longer I can keep lying to you." My heart skipped a beat. "Sarah, please, just tell me." She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Then, with an almost imperceptible nod, she spoke the words that shattered everything I thought I knew about her. "I've been working for them. The people I was meeting last night, they're part of a network. A criminal organization, Mark. I didn't want you to know because I thought I could keep it separate from us. From you. But now you're involved. And I can't protect you anymore." The room seemed to tilt. The air, once light, was suddenly heavy with the weight of her confession. My mind reeled. "A criminal organization? Sarah? I've been laundering money for them," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "It started small, just a few transactions. I thought it was harmless at first. But then it grew, and I got in too deep. They have leverage over me, Mark. If I don't keep helping them, they'll come after us. They'll come after you." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, had been living a double life, one filled with danger and deceit. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. How could this be happening? How had I missed the signs? How had she been able to hide this from me for so long? "I never wanted this for you," she said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted you to find out. But I was so scared, and I didn't know how to get out. Why didn't you tell me?" I managed to say, my voice thick with disbelief. "Why didn't you come to me?" "I couldn't," she whispered. "I couldn't risk it. I thought if I could just do what they wanted, it would all go away. But it didn't. And now you're involved, Mark. And I don't know what to do." I took a step back, the distance between us growing, as if the truth had built an invisible wall between us. Couldn't breathe. My whole life had just crumbled, and I didn't know if I could even look at her the same way anymore. "Sarah," my voice cracked, "I don't know if I can help you with this. This is too much. I need time to think." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand. I've ruined everything." And with that, I turned away, walking out of the kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The silence in the house was suffocating. I could feel the weight of Sarah's words pressing down on me every time I moved. My mind raced in circles, trying to process everything she had just confessed. But no matter how much I tried to wrap my head around it, the truth felt like a foreign language I couldn't understand. Sarah was involved in something criminal. She had lied to me for years, and now I was part of it whether I wanted to be or not. I spent the rest of the day locked in my office, unable to focus on anything. Work felt pointless. Every email and phone call just a distraction from the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't concentrate. My thoughts kept circling back to Sarah, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had trusted above all else. How could she keep something like that from me? How could she live a lie for so long, knowing the danger it could bring to both of us? And yet, there was a part of me that couldn't completely turn my back on her. She was scared. I could see that in her eyes. She was trapped, cornered by forces she couldn't control. And in some twisted way, I could understand her fear. But that didn't mean I could just ignore the reality of the situation. As the hours dragged on, I knew I couldn't stay cooped up in my office forever. I had to face her. I had to confront what she had told me, and maybe, just maybe, find a way out of this mess. I walked back into the living room, finding Sarah sitting on the couch, staring at her hands, her posture hunched in a way that made her look smaller than she really was. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red from crying, but there was no surprise in her gaze. She had been waiting for me to come to her. "I don't know what to say, Sarah," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't respond immediately, just watched me with a mix of fear and guilt. I wanted to be angry, to scream at her for what she had done, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the way she looked at me, as if she had already been punished enough. Or maybe it was because I still loved her, despite everything. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said after a long pause, "but I need you to understand. I never wanted this to happen. I thought I could control it, keep you out of it. But now, I don't know what to do." I rubbed my temples, trying to hold onto the fragments of my sanity. "I don't know how to help you, Sarah. This is so much. I don't even know where to start." She stood up slowly, her eyes pleading. "Please, Mark. I never wanted you to get caught in this. I couldn't leave. Couldn't get out. I was too far in, and I didn't know how to break free." "Who are they, Sarah?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Who are you working for? Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't," she repeated, her voice breaking. "I thought I could handle it on my own. But they're dangerous. They have control over everything. If I tried to leave, they would have hurt you. I didn't want to risk that." "So you thought keeping it from me was the right thing to do?" I asked, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You thought lying to me was going to protect me?" She didn't answer, but the way she lowered her head told me everything. She had convinced herself that the truth would be too much, too painful for me to handle. But in the end, it wasn't her lie that was tearing us apart. It was the fact that she had kept me in the dark for so long. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Sarah," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "You've put us both in danger, and I don't know how we can come back from that." I turned away, walking toward the door. "I need space. I need time to think." "Mark, please," she called, her voice raw with emotion. "Don't leave me like this. I'm sorry. Please don't go." But I couldn't stay. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay anymore. Not when the woman I loved had been lying to me all this time. Not when the truth was so much darker than I ever imagined. I slammed the door behind me, stepping out into the night, my heart breaking as I walked away from the life I thought I knew. The night was colder than it had been in weeks, as if the universe itself was mirroring the numbness that had settled inside me. My car felt like a cage as I drove aimlessly through the streets, the headlights slicing through the dark like a searchlight in the fog of my thoughts. I had to get away from the house, from Sarah, from everything. The truth had shattered my world, and I didn't know how to piece it back together. I stopped at a diner on the edge of town, one of those places where time seems to stand still. The neon sign buzzed faintly, and the diner's window was fogged up from the heat inside. I stepped in, the bell above the door ringing as I entered. The smell of stale coffee and greasy food hung in the air, a comfort to my fractured mind. The waitress, an older woman with a kind face, gave me a once-over before nodding. "Sit anywhere, Han," she said with a soft smile. I slid into a booth in the corner, trying to ignore the fact that my entire body was trembling. I wasn't cold. It was something deeper, something inside me that felt like it was coming apart. When she returned with a cup of coffee, I barely noticed her. My mind was consumed with one question. What now? Sarah's confession had been too much to process all at once. She had been lying to me, hiding things from me, and now I was left holding the pieces of a life I thought I knew. But what hurt more than the lies was the fact that she had thought she could protect me by keeping the truth from me. She had always been the one person I thought I could trust completely. And yet, now I was alone in this. I sat there for what felt like hours, not sure how much time had passed or what I was supposed to do next. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face, her pleading eyes, her desperate apology. I couldn't ignore the pain in her voice, the fear that had bled through every word she said. But could I ever forgive her? Could I live with the knowledge that she had kept something so significant from me? I had to face the fact that I might never get the answers I wanted. I might never understand why she chose to keep me in the dark. But I also had to make a choice. Was I willing to lose her completely, to walk away from everything we had, just because of the secrets she had kept? The waitress came by again, but I barely registered her presence. She refilled my coffee, her eyes narrowing slightly as she saw my empty stare. "You okay, Han?" she asked, her voice softer now. I nodded, barely meeting her eyes. "Just thinking." She gave me a knowing look, but said nothing more, leaving me with my thoughts. I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I had to make a decision. When I left the diner, the night felt colder still, but there was a clarity that had begun to form in my mind. I needed answers. I needed closure. I needed to know the full extent of what Sarah had gotten herself into before I could even begin to understand whether we had any chance at all of surviving this. I drove back to the house, every mile feeling like an eternity. The moment I stepped through the door, I found Sarah sitting in the living room, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red from crying. "I'm here," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm not walking away, but I need you to tell me everything. No more lies, no more secrets." She looked up at me, the relief in her eyes almost palpable. "Mark, I need to hear the full truth, Sarah." I interrupted, my voice firm but calm. "No matter how dark it is, no matter how dangerous it is, I can't keep living in the shadows. I need you to trust me now more than ever." She hesitated for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll tell you everything. But I need you to know, this isn't just about me anymore. It's about us. And I don't know if we can get out of this, but I'm willing to try if you are." I stepped closer to her, the decision made. It wasn't about whether I could forgive her or not. It was about whether I was willing to fight for us, to fight for the life we had built, even if it meant diving deeper into the mess she had created. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice stronger now. "We're in this together, Sarah. No matter what." She took a deep breath, and the words began to pour out of her. As she spoke, I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long, and the truth would bring more questions than answers. But I had made my choice. I was in this for better or for worse. What would you do if the person you loved confessed to a lie that shattered everything you thought you knew? Would you walk away, or would you fight to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it may be? Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking stories. The journey of discovering the truth never ends. It only gets more complicated. Stay tuned to see what happens next.